Welcome to Scriptural Snapshots, brought to you by Living Faith Ministries in Kaiser, West Virginia, where we bring the living Word of God into your life. I'm Pastor Gordon Brubaker. We're talking about the home of the brave, and we're doing this a little bit differently. We're not using so many scriptures, but we're still talking about the concept of God. When Francis Scott Key wrote the Star Spangled Banner, he gave us in the fourth verse what became our national motto, "In God we trust." And it was a foundation for the American Revolution. It was a foundation for much of the government of the United States, that we trusted in God. We believed in providence, which is that the will of God would be done, that good will win over evil, righteousness will defeat evil. We believed in these things by the founding fathers, and many of them attested this in their private life. I know the world tries to say, well, they really weren't Christians. They were deists and all this. Well, they were Christians. There was only one who proclaimed himself to be a deist, and he actually claimed that he believed in Jesus Christ as the Son of the living God. And he accepted biblical principles, so he wasn't much of a deist. Even Ben Franklin, that they said, he was an atheist. No, he wasn't. He was converted. He was a Christian. He wrote about it in his letters. His early life was a little bit risque, but as he got older, he was a supporter of Witherspoon and a promoter of the preaching of the gospel around the United States, and printed his sermons. He gave his life to Jesus Christ, and he believed in the gospel of Christ, and he was instrumental in instituting prayer at the Continental Convention when they were doing the Declaration of Independence and over the U.S. Constitution. Again, he initiated prayer in both of those. So if he was a deist or an unbeliever, he wasn't a very good one, but he confessed his faith in Jesus Christ. We're talking about the War of 1812, and the War of 1812 started when America rose up against English ships that were stopping American ships on the oceans and confiscating or taking captive American sailors. And we said, well, you can't do this. He said, and see, England had this concept that America was still just a rebellious English colony. They really did not accept us. Their government did not accept us as an independent nation. So the War of 1812, we were fighting because you can't just come in and take American citizens. You don't have the right to do it. We are a separate nation. And so that brought the war on because we started fighting, and we built a navy to fight against the British warships. But the war against England was not going very well. Washington, D.C. had been burned. They had escaped with taking some of the valuables, and even the Declaration of Independence, they were able to get that out of the Capitol before the British burned it to the ground. And so the war wasn't going good. British had landed troops on American soil, and it just was not going good. And so they were going to invade Baltimore, and they sent 19 warships to defeat Fort McHenry, because that was the guard of the bay going into Baltimore, and they had to conquer the fort in order to gain victory and be able to land troops on. And fortunately they did not win that battle. Now, let me read a few things. The U.S. Constitution had only been signed 23 years earlier on March the 4th, 1789. But Britain still saw us as a rebellious American colony. 19 ships began a continuous fire on Fort McHenry that lasted for 25 hours. Over 1,800 cannonballs, rockets, and mortar shells were fired at the earthen foundations of Fort McHenry. The citizens of Baltimore darkened all the lights. They put all the lights out in the town so that the British could not focus on the fort, so they couldn't get their aim exactly the right way, but the citizens were behind to protect the fort. So the British had a hard time locating the fort. A thunderstorm blew in, and it rained so heavily, and the ground was so saturated that of the rockets and the cannonballs that were fired at the fort, they often sunk in the soft mud and did very little damage to the fort itself. And on the morning of September the 14th, 1814, Francis Scott Key, who was being held on the British warship HMS Surprise, saw, quote, through the dawn's early light, that the large American flag was still flying. On the back of an envelope, he wrote what would become our national anthem, and two prominent ideals became cemented into American culture. In God we trust, and the home of the brave. I'm Pastor Gordon Brubaker. God bless you.